Hi there. Week 8. Good to see you guys. So, um, we've kind of got a lot going on in the Science Olympiad world. Competitions are kind of going all over the place, and everyone's a little bit busy. And so, we're going to try and kind of cater our lab sessions to work with everyone's schedules, make sure you're all getting enough sleep and rest and stuff, other stuff that you can do to like study and be on top of your stuff. And so, with that, this week and next week we're going to kind of try to run two parallel lessons. This week, each of these could be one full session, but I decided to split them up into two. And so we'll start off this week doing a little bit of an introduction to complements, which I think is really fun. And then we'll also, in preparation for us hosting our own Sierra Vista tournament, we'll be talking a little bit about event management, and that will be very much an exciting and interesting topic for me to talk about, and you probably won't find it interesting at all, and that's okay. But yeah, let's kind of jump in with complements. Just as a recap of past week, we talked about analyzing aspects of others' behavior. I saw a lot of you completed the assignment on Classroom. Thank you for that. If you haven't, please do complete that. There's a few assignments that I give out that are kind of important. This is one of them. So please do complete the assignment, and we'll go over and talk about that a little bit more next week. Other than that, let's start off complements. And so, like I said, this will be a two-part discussion. We're just going to focus on one aspect of complements today, and we'll finish the other aspect of complements next week. Introduction to complements, though, I want to explain, or I want to make an argument for why, in the first place, you should care about complements, why you should consider giving out more complements than you do right now. And I think I've got a couple points that, regardless of what your background is, you're going to resonate with a little bit. Societally speaking, which I hope you all take into consideration when you choose your actions, societally speaking, other people feel good when you give them compliments. They feel seen, they feel recognized, they feel cared for. It builds cultures of goodwill, which is a fancy way of saying people are happier and they like working with each other. And in terms of productivity or output, that leads to more productivity, more output out of a given team that you're working with. Another fun one that I like to do is like a compliment is a great way of starting as like breaking the ice with someone. Some people like to do jokes. I like to do jokes a lot. I also like to do compliments, like, hey, I really like this and that. And then you start asking questions like, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? Stuff like that. I've had to do that a lot in college. When you meet 102, I keep track of each one of them, 102 new people. You got to have different ways of kind of breaking the ice and talking to people. So compliments are a great way of doing that. It allows you to kind of develop relationships with people in that sense. Selfishly speaking, if you are more inclined to be a selfishly thinking person, which I get it, if you give out compliments, people appreciate you more. They like you specifically more. They're more likely to gravitate towards you, more likely to want to work with you or to help you contribute to your well-being. Also, they're more likely to compliment you, which always feels good. We talked about this last week, but by making compliments an intentional act, you are forcing yourself and training yourself to see good things in people, which I would argue is just healthy in general. Like the more positivity you can have in your life that is healthy and based in reason, the better. And being able to compliment someone means you see something good in them. And so you want to target that. And yeah, like I said, you get more compliments, and that always feels good. I can tell you stories about compliments that I've gotten. I remember where I was standing 5 years ago. I got a compliment on my haircut. I remember exactly where I was, remember who said it, and that stuck with me. I remember 3 years ago, I got a compliment from a parent, a Sayali parent. I remember where I was, and that kind of gave me a high for a little while, and I really rode that for a while. So I think compliments have bigger effects on people than we may realize. And so if I can get you to kind of nudge your way into giving people more compliments, hey, sounds good. There are kind of two main classifications of compliment targets in my mind. You have the tangible things, so that's basically going to be their appearance. And then you have the intangible things, actions, beliefs, personality traits. We'll get into that next week. This week, super easy. we're just going to focus on the tangible stuff. And so, like things that you can actually see in people that you want to talk about, and say, hey, I like your shirt, I like your haircut today. Super boring lesson, but if you're able to implement that, like it's really cool. And so when it comes to like picking appropriate targets, there is a very fine line that you walk. No, I'm going to redact that statement. There is a pretty thick, bold line that is pretty hard to cross unless you are truly a weird person. So don't be a weird person. In terms of appropriate things like you see here, I argue, and I think people would agree with me, that these are pretty reasonable things to compliment. So someone's got a nice haircut, go for it. If someone has like a new hoodie and you think it looks cool, say so. Same thing with like shoes. I like your shoes today. Those I think most people would agree are appropriate things to compliment. Things that are inappropriate to compliment. No one could possibly, in my mind, say, wow, your eyes are beautiful, and not sound like one of those people who are just, you don't want to talk to. Same thing with height, like, wow, you are so cool for being that tall. No, that's not how that works. And so in general, like, don't be that person who calls out the really weird stuff. Now laughter is actually something that you may not have considered before. And I'll be honest, I kind of stand firm on laughter. So I once read, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but when someone is laughing, when someone is genuinely laughing, and you can usually tell when someone's genuinely laughing, that is realistically the one time in your interaction with them that you truly know their emotion and you truly see them at like the best they can be. Like when someone is truly laughing, that is the pinnacle of their human experience, roughly speaking. And that's when you see that happen, that's basically as good as it gets for them. And so for you to say, I think her laugh is silly, or I think her laugh is weird, that means that if that person ever experiences this high in their life, this ultimate, this joy that they're experiencing, and they're sitting there thinking about like, yeah, my laugh's a little bit weird. It takes it out of the experience. It takes you out of experiencing that something that's funny or something that's so lighthearted when you're sitting there reflecting on like, well, I shouldn't really be laughing because people think it's weird. And so I stand very strongly against the notion that you should make fun of someone's laugh for a multitude of reasons, but that one especially, that when you bring attention to someone's laugh in a negative light, it just ruins the best part of their day. It ruins the best part of the day, and that's just a horrible thing to do. Now, compliments, in theory, are a good thing, but I feel like you could make the case that if you compliment someone's laugh, you're kind of bringing attention to it, and you're kind of calling it out, even though technically you're doing a good thing. It could still be interpreted as like another person could still see it as calling attention to an aspect of their life that they didn't think brought attention to themselves, and they still may be self-critical about it, even though you present it as a good thing. And so that's a little side tangent that, yeah, I'm very firm about my beliefs on what we do with people's laughter. Honestly, just don't talk about it and let them enjoy their moment. I would argue that with appropriate and inappropriate things to compliment, there are a few things that kind of go on a case-by-case basis. So obviously, if you say, like, you walk up to someone and go, wow, your teeth are really straight, probably not a good idea. Yes, that's creepy. Don't do that. Same thing with like, oh wow, you have a really good like weight. Like, no, that's not something you would do. But I would also argue that there are times where it may be appropriate given the circumstances, given your delivery. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Speaking more as just like a general rule for what you see when you see this appropriate category and see the inappropriate category. I read this I believe on the internet, and it kind of resonated with me. the general rule for compliments is that by and large, unless you know someone like super, super well and you're like absolutely best with them, by and large, compliments should be directed to things that people have control over, things that they have influence over in their life, that they're able to put effort into. Those should be the targets of compliments. For example, saying that you like someone's jacket, like it's a cool jacket and it matches their pants. Like they have control over that. Saying that someone's eyes are a really pretty color kind of toes that line a little bit. And the fact that they don't have control over their eye color is kind of what makes that a little bit like, maybe you don't want to do that. Similarly, as we talked about with our previous example of laughter, consider what like backhanded effects a compliment could have. For example, I think a good example of this is weight, for example. There are people who are trying to lose weight, and you say, wow, you really lost a ton of weight, didn't you? Now, if that person is very self-conscious about their weight, then you presenting and calling it out, saying like, wow, you look really good compared to how you used to look. That backhanded effect is pretty strong. And so some people may not notice, they may not care, but considering like the way you present a compliment, as in like, wow, you look a lot better than you used to, that may follow the criteria of something they have control over, but also it has the potential to insult someone's past, and that's not a good idea. And so let's talk about teeth and weight specifically. So like, again, we talked about weight. Like if someone's self-conscious about their weight, then maybe saying like, wow, you were really a lot heavier and now you're not. Like that's a horrible thing to say. But if someone shares with you that like, hey, I've been trying to lose weight recently, and you see that like, hey, I dropped 5 pounds over the last couple months, I'm going for 10. Like you see they're making effort and they're sharing that with you, then absolutely. If you see that they're really putting in the effort and they're really succeeding, that's a wonderful thing to compliment. I think there's a similar effect with like teeth. Walking up to someone and saying, hey, your teeth are really straight, really weird. But if someone was like very self-conscious about their teeth and they had braces, and they got braces off or whatever, and now it's like, hey, now you look really good. Like this is a good look on you. I think that can be healthy. And so don't make it a weird thing, but when someone's putting effort into it and they're hoping that others recognize that effort and you're able to call it out, that's a wonderful thing. And people feel especially validated that you are seeing an aspect of their life that they may not have very openly shared with other people, but that they're hoping other people would notice. And so qualifiers, in regards to now that we have an appropriate thing to compliment, hair, like tops or shirts, hoodies, jackets. I'm a big fan of shoes because there's a lot of people who are very proud of their shoes. That's always a fun one. I think there are 3 categories that kind of came to mind. I'm sure you can come up with more, but all of these categories tend to revolve around the notion that you are, in a non-creepy way, keeping track of people over time. So, as an example, if someone's wearing a new pair of shoes, in order to know that they're a new pair of shoes, you have to have looked at their shoes before, taken a mental snapshot, and put that in a filing cabinet in your brain somewhere. And then you see they're wearing something new. Hey, that looks really cool. I like your shoes today. That's a great way of like recognizing, because someone goes shopping, they get something new, they want to feel validated, like it's a product that they invested in, they want others to feel the same. That's a great way of like, hey, I've never seen you wear that before. It looks really good. You can do it with shoes. I do that with like haircuts. Like, hey, new haircut, looks good. All of those are ways of like taking something that you have noticed over time, and you seeing for the first time something different. Looks good. Good job. Keep it up. Similarly, I mean, color. If something's a cool color, I have a couple friends I remember from high school who they had shirts that were unique colors. It wasn't just like blue or black. It was like a very light orange, or like a kind of a scarlet-esque purple-ish kind of color. And it just looked really nice. It was a distinct color. No one else wore it. And so I was like, hey, I really like the green vest today. It's a good look. And people like that because they know when they're making choices on what to wear and what to do, that they're hoping people will validate that, and you can validate that. Um, Matching, if something's matching or if someone is coordinating something, that's a sign of effort. For example, if someone has like a color matching, like a hoodie and pants, um, that was most likely an intentional choice. Not always. I can tell you from experience, it's not always intentional, but most likely is an intentional choice. And they are trying to look good. They're trying to make stuff work together. And so if you see a pattern or you see something that looks good and you can tell they try to put effort into it, let them know, and they feel better. And so I think that's just like, that's a really, really, really short crash course on just like the simple, easy to give compliments. There's ways of taking compliments deeper. We'll talk about that next week. But yeah, these is a really, really simple way of just like, hey, I like your shirt today, and it's lighthearted. You feel good, they feel good, everyone's really happy. And so yeah, we'll continue this kind of strand idea of compliments next week. But right now, we are going to transition to event management. So this is a big, scary way of saying like running an event. And what I have planned for this is I've got between 4 and 5 kind of little niche topics related to running our invitational that I'm going to share with you. I do not expect you to, well, frankly, I don't expect you to care. You may not find it interesting, but by introducing these topics, I'm hoping that when you are put into a position where you need to set up and manage and run an event, that you'll be more likely to self-consciously or automatically start to consider aspects of planning that you haven't come across before. There are people who plan events for a living. They are professionals at it. And if you were to ask them how they do it, there's a lot of factors that go into setting up something for a dozen or 50, or in our case, like multiple hundred people, to make sure that everyone's having a good time, that the experience is solid and it's safe. And so we're going to do just a very, very quick run through 2 topics that are related to our invitational that, again, you may find interesting, you may not. I think they're cool. I think the science and analytics and STEM kind of subjects that go in to planning things is really interesting. And so let's do a quick dive into 2 of those topics today, and then I'll let you go a little bit early. The first is failure. So you have heard it said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I want to propose another saying. I've made this up, and I'm very proud of it. If you fail to plan to fail, you plan to fail. If you fail to plan to fail, you plan to fail. So let's break down the syntax of that. If you fail to plan, meaning if you don't plan to fail. So if you don't plan on failing, then you plan to fail. You will fail, and you're going to fail bad. Kind of translated to reasonable English, like if you aren't prepared and you're not planning on things going wrong, when they go wrong, you are really going to be toast. And I know that every event manager, event planner, all of our tournaments, we have plans in place for when things go wrong. And so I'm going to introduce just a couple short bullet points on some things that we're kind of facing in planning our tournament. Taking it bigger though, like if you've ever been to a sports game, a sports stadium, I think that's a really good example of big events. There's a lot of people, concerts, similar vibe. You have thousands or tens of thousands of people all in one place. When you have that many people in one place, things will go wrong. Very common ones that you'll see if you go to a sports arena or like a concert, you will see EMTs, paramedics in ambulances, either inside or right outside the venue, waiting for someone to have a heart attack, someone to choke on some food, waiting for something bad to happen. They're ready to go because they expect something bad to happen. They know something bad's going to happen. And so when something bad happens, they're ready to respond and take care of that. There's based on tragic fires that have happened in our world and our country's history, there's always fire plans. So if there's a fire, where are people going? How are they getting out of the building? If there was some sort of violent threat, or if there's riots or protests that turn to kind of a crowd hysteria moment, especially when it comes to things like sports games, there are plans in place for how to control the crowd, how to protect certain people. That's especially prevalent with government operations when you have either someone like a president, vice president, or a governor. There's a chance for violence or protests. I guarantee you there will be safety plans to keep people safe, to keep audience members safe, people in the crowd safe. And so that's a very key aspect of planning an event, is your emergency planning. Now, we're a Science Olympiad competition. Realistically, we're not expecting anything major to happen when it comes to topics like this. Most events hosted by like a city organization, they may have like a first aid booth in case someone gets hurt. They're able to give people like bandages or gauze, whatever they may need. But we're not planning, or we're not expecting to have major crises that require our intervention. And so I will say that our invitational does not have plans to deal with medical or fire emergencies. I'll be transparent about that. The plan is to call 911, let them take care of it. Now, again, if we had tens of thousands of people, that might not be as easy, but we're chilling in that sense. However, there are a lot of ways that Science Olympiad can go wrong. Competitions are very dynamic environments. There's a lot of things happening, there's a lot of moving pieces, and try as myself and Mr. Vole and Tim do to plan things ahead. Every time we do, something always goes wrong, something doesn't go according to plan. And so this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to share 4 quick bullet points of things that we are aware of and we have are integrating plans to deal with in the event something were to happen. So 4 things that come to mind. A proctor just doesn't show up. So maybe a proctor gets stuck in traffic, or issues with weather, or they're sick, or it's a Division A coach who gets stuck in an event. And for whatever reason, there are 30 kids sitting in a classroom and there's no proctor. We can deal with that very easily by having designated people be on call or be ready to go. And so if in the event that we need a proctor, we pull them, grab them, drop what you're doing, go into the room and give them their dynamic planning test. That's a very real possibility of happening at our competition. And so we are ready to deal with that should that happen. Another very common issue that you will see very frequently, not enough tests or materials for an event. This actually happened last quarter in college, where for one of my classes, there was 235 students taking a midterm. There was 1 extra test, and there were 10 kids who did not have tests. And so when you're dealing with such a large population, you have to plan for some sort of issue. Someone's going to drop a test in a puddle of water, or in something like powders, like CJAP powders. Someone's going to spill the powders all over the floor and can't use it. Or someone's going to drop and break a very important instrument that you need for something like bioprocess lab. If that's the case, and if those materials are critical to the successful running of your event, you can implement a sort of a buffer-esque rule. So 10% rule, if you have 60 tests, print 6 extra. If you're setting up 10 little containers of powder, put an extra one there just in case. We actually did that for our scrimmage, the Mira Loma Panera Bread scrimmage. We had extra tests in both locations in the event that someone either didn't sign up correctly, or a test got damaged or didn't print correctly. We had extras ready to go to maximize the smoothness of our operation, to make sure everything's going as smooth as possible, because that's less problems for us to deal with in the moment. Another real possibility is a coach disagrees with the proctor, and this happens. Well, it probably happens at every tournament, honestly. And so by communicating to coaches the appeals process ahead of time, they know that when something goes wrong, they don't need to go running up to Tim and start yelling at Tim's face. They can go through the appropriate channels. We'll deal with it. We'll make sure we get to a resolution that everyone's happy with. And there's no crises. There's no crises to deal with, because try as we might to plan out all of the issues that could happen, we all know that you can't do that completely, at least. And so we plan to have certain issues. And the goal of planning for those issues is that by addressing them now, when new issues crop up that we weren't expecting or that we aren't ready for, we'll be able to address those immediately instead of handling all these simple issues that we could have planned out ahead of time. And so coaches challenging a proctor and having to appeal to a tournament director is something we can take care of ahead of time just to minimize the workload on the day of. Probably, honestly, I would argue probably the biggest one for invitationals, especially scrimmages, but also for invitationals, is event timings. So an event gets started late, someone shows up late, or something happens and the kids are running late to the next event. That happens a lot. And by designing our schedule with that possibility in mind, we're able to minimize the effects of that if/when that happens. We have integrated buffer times between blocks. And so I believe it's a 10-minute block or 10-minute window between blocks. If an event runs a little bit late, their students are still able to make their way to the next event should they need to. And then also, we have a designated 30-minute lunch break. And that lunch break isn't just for the sake of our competitors. Now, we might present it to the public as that. We might say, hey, we want to make sure we give everyone some time to rest, catch up with your team, and get some food. And that sounds great. And all the teams that are coming are very happy to hear that we care so much about them. But behind the scenes, first of all, it's a great buffer. If something goes catastrophic, you've got 30 minutes to try and work with in the event that you need to. Also, we're not telling teams this, but we're using that window to turn around the rooms and reset them for a different event because we're reusing the same rooms for different events. And so that's kind of like a behind the scenes thing that we're kind of working with. And we're not going to tell people that. There's no need to tell people that. We just want to let them know that we care about them. And so we do. And so, yeah, by designing our schedule, not having things back to back to back to back, but giving the opportunity for things to go wrong. When they go wrong, we're able to be tolerant to that fault. Fault tolerance is a way of putting that. We're able to deal with those issues when they come up. And so, yeah, that's like a super duper short crash course on things that can go wrong. Again, you don't need to worry about that because you're not running this competition. But if you're in a position in a few months or years where you have to manage something, a small thing, maybe you're running a scrimmage for Division A kids, or you're helping with tryouts for next year. Having principles like that in the back of your head could be kind of nice to have. It's good to be able to plan for when things go wrong. And so, again, just by introducing that concept to you, hopefully it's something that you may not remember until you actually need it, and it'll crop up and you'll be ready to go. Now, something that I can almost guarantee you won't need, but I still want to talk about it, is the idea of traffic flow. So I like this kind of science. You probably don't care, but you're a captive audience, and so I'm going to talk about it for a little bit. And I'm going to keep saying this point, I'm going to keep hammering it home. You probably will never need to deal with this. But by at least showing you the depth that you can go into certain aspects of planning, when you need to plan, you'll be more likely to do it yourself. Let's talk traffic flow. Okay, here's a satellite image of Beacon Park School, the site of our Science Olympiad tournament. Let's think about when someone shows up to Beacon Park because they want to compete in the tournament. What are they going to want to do? Well, most likely what our customer is going to look like. There'd be two main classifications of customer that we're expecting. We're expecting cars to drive up with a parent in the driver's seat, kid or multiple kids in the passenger seat, and they are going to want to get those kids to the tournament as quickly as possible. Our second type of customer is probably going to be school buses or charter buses, where it's one driver and a whole team of people. All of those groups, their desire is to get into the competition, preferably as quickly as possible, preferably with as little time for the driver as possible. Those are some of the variables that we're keeping in mind. And so as we're designing our competition schedule, we may want to consider the implications that having multiple hundred people show up at one place at one time could have on making sure everyone gets in on time. And so we're going to figure out a way of designing our system to manage traffic, to reduce the amount of time people spend waiting, to make sure people get in and out, and to leave customers with a satisfied experience. And so, with that being said, we talk about the main ways people are going to get into this competition. Again, it's probably going to be a parent. Kids are going to be there, and the parent's probably going to drive in and drop their kid off. Because honestly, if they don't really need their a mom or dad to carry their binder with them to the home base. And so it's probably going to be drop the kids off, parents go find a way to park. Okay, that's what we're expecting. We're expecting we need to design a system to minimize the amount of time people spend dropping off and parking. And so with that, we looked first towards the dropping off part. Let's look at our infrastructure that we're working with at our local level, our local infrastructure. This is our tournament, our event. Technically speaking, we're only responsible for what happens on this campus. So with that being said, in terms of drop off, right? We have a nice drop off area right here on this left side, the west side of campus. You can't see it with the arrows, but in terms of entrances are to the south, and exit is to the west here. There's also a second entrance and exit right here for parking. We're going to ignore that because that parking is going to be reserved for a separate set of operations. So we're just talking about drop-offs right now. We're going to make sure that when we design our system, we have people entering here. They're going to do their big drop-off in the big valet line here, and then they're going to exit to the west. We have a second drop-off area up top. In this case, the entrance is on the left. Exit is on the right. And so when we're designing our system, we got to keep in mind this is what we're given. We can't change anything. This is what we have to work with, and so we're going to use these pieces of infrastructure to the greatest ability that we can. Now, again, I like nerding out about this. This is really fun for me. Let's talk about flow, like things that are moving, right? I think a good way of thinking about that is like, you could think of it as like a line at Disneyland. When you're waiting for a line at Disneyland, you want the line to be moving. And so ideally anything that helps get more people through a line into the ride and out the ride is going to make the line experience shorter. You can kind of take that, if you want to kind of do a little bit of a more metaphorical sense, into like a factory. You have the machine that puts the piece of metal on the conveyor belt. Then you have the machine that presses the metal. Then you have the machine that cuts the metal, and then the machine that paints the metal. If your machine that can place metal on the conveyor belt can place 200 pieces of metal per minute, but your cutting machine can only cut one piece of metal per minute, you can see right away that there's going to be a huge pileup of metal waiting to be cut that's being loaded up but not cut yet. That's called a bottleneck. So a bottleneck, in kind of colloquial definition, is the region of a system where the flow is lesser than the rest of the system. If you're chemistry minded, it could be interpreted as like the rate determining step. But it's a part of the experience, a part of the system that runs slower than everything else, and therefore stuff gets kind of locked up there and stopped there. Now, while theoretically bottlenecks are avoidable, for all intents and purposes in the real world, it is impossible to create a system without a bottleneck. That is a concept taken away from the goal, a process and ongoing improvement, which I talked about at the very, very beginning of this course. If you're interested in this kind of science, I'd highly recommend that book. But it is impossible, for all intents and purposes, to avoid bottlenecks. You cannot get rid of bottlenecks, because if you improve the bottleneck, if you make a machine move faster, then the bottleneck isn't going to go away. It's just going to move to a different part of the factory. Now suddenly the cutting machine isn't the problem. Now the painting machine is the problem because it's going too slow. And you try to make that faster. Well, now the loading machine is the problem. And so you can't get rid of bottlenecks. You cannot get rid of bottlenecks in a system. And so when you have a bottleneck, your goal shouldn't be, how are we going to get rid of it? It should be, okay, you have to acknowledge it. This is the bottleneck. Let's try to make this as fast as possible. In our case, our goal is to get people dropped off and parked as fast as possible. these streets that they're driving on, realistically, not going to be a whole ton of traffic, right? There's no stoplights, they're just stop signs. And so people are going to flow pretty quickly through the streets. And then they're going to pull in the drop off area and they're going to stop. And gosh darn it, little Timmy just cannot get his build out of the trunk and he takes way too long. And instead of spending 5 seconds unloading, he's taking 4 minutes. There's your bottleneck. The fact that people can enter the drop-off area very easily because there's flow behind the system. The fact that people can exit the bottleneck very easily, there's flow after the system with more streets, means that drop-off area is going to be a bottleneck. And so, with that being said, our goal should be to maximize the amount of people we're getting through that bottleneck through an intervention that we can implement. And so, if you think back, if you pay attention to the world around you, perhaps you've thought or you've noticed that if you're ever at an airport, at the arrivals curb, there are signs saying and audio announcements saying the white zone is for immediate passenger loading and unloading only. There are also oftentimes security guards, police officers, or other employees with badges and wands and flashlights, basically forcing people to keep moving. They are trying to limit the amount of people who show up 10 minutes early to pick up their passenger. They pull into the curb and they just park there and sit there. They don't like that. It blocks traffic. It slows down other people whose passengers are standing there waiting, waving, ready to go. It slows down the system, lets people can get through. Traffic jams form. People are unhappy. They go complain to their local politician, and everyone's sad. We're going to probably have a similar system. If we want to implement a plan to mitigate traffic, we'll probably implement some sort of similar system here. It would likely be, if we were to propose this, it'd likely be some sort of parent or multiple parents who are kind of patrolling the sidewalks, making sure people are doing their best to unload and keep moving, asking people, don't stay with your car, please. Don't get out of your car. Let's keep you moving. Go find some parking. Come on back. That ensures that people are leaving this area open to allow other families to drop off, other buses to drop off, get kids in, and get parents out to go park. And so that's the first principle of flow, traffic flow, flow design, factory design, whatever you want to call it. Keep bottlenecks moving. Now, this is our local area. This is technically all the things we're responsible for as tournament directors if you want to be kind of that selfish, closed-minded perspective. But you don't want to be that selfish, closed-minded perspective because you're not like that because you're in this class. So let's zoom out. We see Beacon Park in the middle. We have our 2 drop-off areas, as you can see that. And we have a whole ton of neighborhoods in the local vicinity. Now, in terms of parking operations, based on conversations with the city, we have established that we will be allowed to use these local neighborhoods for parking. And so you don't need to get picky on like street laws and street rules and stuff like that. Technically speaking, they can't park in driveways. They can only park on major public streets. But basically, I've marked, using my fancy graphic editor, some parking areas that people will be encouraged to park at, because our parking on campus will be limited compared to the amount of people who will be attending. And so, as we remember, our general principle or our general expectation of our customers, the path that they're going to follow to get through our system is going to be drop off, then park. And so, just like I'm drawing like a football play call, I'm going to be doing a bunch of circles and arrows. And it looks very sloppy, and I know that, but there's heart behind it. I hope you know that too. We have our mission is to get people from the bottleneck, from this drop-off area, into parking as fast as possible. And so just kind of when we want to talk about like our variable of minimizing the amount of people who are waiting, maximizing people who are getting through, another one we want to keep in mind is, technically speaking, there is parking available in Tustin and Anaheim and Long Beach they could park at and walk back. But people don't want to do that. So from the customer side, the customer wants to drive as short a distance as possible and ultimately walk as short a distance as possible. And so while it's possible that we may want to, that someone could hypothetically drop their kid off on our western drop-off area and then park in the northeast, we probably wouldn't want to propose that as a reasonable plan. It would probably be better for us to encourage them to go to a closer area for their sake in terms of walking distance, but also for our sake, because the less amount of time they spend on the road, the less chance they have of causing traffic, and the greater chance we have of keeping people moving through our system. And so we're going to keep in mind our principle that we want to get people to as close as to the drop-off area as possible. And so we'll kind of look towards, for our western drop-off area, kind of using this kind of L-shaped region, and for our northern drop-off area, kind of using the opposite L-shaped region. And so with that in mind, let's start drawing arrows. So this is the first one I kind of came up with. We know that our entrance area to this western drop-off area is on the south. Now, when it comes to street navigation, this is kind of getting into city planning and kind of civil engineering, but people tend to gravitate towards using major streets over minor streets. They'd be more likely to use a major avenue than like a neighborhood driveway street when they're trying to get somewhere. You kind of get into the weeds with that when it comes to cities that are designed like Irvine, which have a lot of, in some ways it's very well designed, but I'll have a lot of local streets that kind of take people to certain parts of the town. And so while a lot of people may be coming from this direction in order to get to our drop-off area, we're going to encourage people to use this southern street, and it'll kind of fit in more as we expand our plan outward. So we're going to start encouraging people to come from the south, enter the drop-off area. That's where we're going to have our parents going, hurry up, please, move along, please, very politely with a smile on their face, getting people out of there to minimize the effects of our bottleneck. And from there, people are going to be out of the drop-off area, and they will be moving into different other regions of town. And so once we kind of have people get to this point of our system, they've done their drop-off, they're ready to move on to parking, we can kind of like step back, honestly. We don't need to tell people that when you're at this intersection, you need to turn right and fill up this neighborhood, and then go south and fill up this neighborhood, and then go east and fill this neighborhood in that order. Like, part of designing a system for an intelligent species is recognizing that a species is intelligent and can make reasonable decisions once you get them far enough along. People will kind of naturally gravitate, like I said, towards minimizing the amount of distance they have to drive. And so while if you were managing a computer system, you might instruct the first car to park at this corner of the street, the second car to park at this corner of the street, and then slowly fill out this line, and then jump up to here. Like, humans are kind of do most of that on their own. And so you don't need to sit there and talk through every single operation for them. Just kind of give them the autonomy to do their thing. Now, I think it's a really kind of a weird way of approaching this design, but one thing that might be interesting to keep in mind when it comes to flow, I alluded to a little bit earlier, is that traffic, just as a concept, traffic in terms of cars, but also traffic in terms of like things in a factory assembly line, or traffic in terms of people who are checking into a Division A meeting, which, if you haven't thought about before, yes, those Div A meetings have a lot of traffic and people trying to get people signed up for stuff or on a lineup or off to a breakout room. That tends to happen when the arrival rate, meaning the rate at which people arrive into the situation, or factory parts arrive into the situation, is faster than the rate at which people or things are exiting the situation. And so if we have 10 cars that are dropping off every minute and they're ready to go, and we have one parking lot, then you're kind of limiting the rate at which people are able to leave that drop-off area and get to park and get out of the way. And so the second principle that you may want to keep in mind in terms of managing traffic flow is that you want to have more exits than entrances. You want to have people more likely, once they're out, you want to get them out as fast as possible, get them out of the way. If people need to come in slowly, that's fine. We would rather have someone be waiting on the freeway or waiting at some intersection up 2 miles away than waiting right outside this drop-off area for a number of reasons. First of all, it slows down our drop-off procedures. Second of all, they're associating the slowdown with us and not just general traffic. And so by providing multiple exits for the people who have exited this drop-off area to go to, you're able to get them out of the way, get them parked, get them ready to go, and off on their merry little way. Now, keep in mind, those exits have to be desirable. You can't say that you want to give someone a parking spot in Long Beach and expect them to actually take it. They're more likely to fight the system and try and navigate somewhere that you don't want them to go rather than take your undesirable faraway parking spot. And so in our design here, we are choosing to give up these 3 neighborhoods as parking regions for people dropping off on the western drop-off area. All of those regions are appealing. They're close. They're easily accessible. And so people are likely to gravitate towards them if we present them with that plan, should we choose to do so. With that said, we have a second piece of infrastructure we haven't even touched yet. Let's do that now. We want to start using the second drop-off area. And in order to do that, we want to have cars start coming in. And now, when we're talking about this, the blue path that we're taking, that's really addressing cars coming from the south, southeast area. But there are other cars that could be coming from other different directions. Now, the more you want to go into planning, the more you can look at like, okay, well, the 5 freeway technically is way down here. And so there's a lot of people coming from this direction. Also, people could be coming from the north that take the toll road, whatever. But just general principle, we want to be able to cater to a wide direction of inputs. And so we're going to start using this upper drop-off area. And to do so, let's start with kind of our pink line here. This is a major avenue. So again, a lot of cars are willing to use it if you suggest it to them. And so we are going to have people start approaching from the pink area. And I didn't show it, but also people approaching from the north, should they choose to do so, or northeast if they want to do so. Just kind of giving that opportunity for them to come in and drop off from a different direction in order to minimize the burden on this single traffic area. Now, we want to get these people in the pink to this drop-off area. The wrong way to go is straight into the path of the blue cars. By doing so, by having people approach an intersection from 2 different directions, you are forcing a slowdown. Now, in terms of cars, that means you're forcing them to pull up to the intersection, wait at the stop sign or wait at the stoplight, and then go. In terms of one car, that's what? Like at most 10 seconds of delay. But one concept that you'll see as a recurring theme when it comes to managing big events is that when you're dealing with a lot of people, super duper small changes in a system have massive effects. And we'll talk more about that when it comes to managing the hype of a crowd next week. But in this case, yes, having a single car pull up this intersection and do a left turn on a stop sign, not a big deal. But when you're directing 50 or 100 cars to this intersection and you've got people coming out of this drop-off area going the opposite direction, that is like big slowdown. The intersection is going to be backed up in both directions. This is going to be backed up onto the main avenue. The blue line is going to be backed up onto the drop-off area, which means we can't let people into the drop-off area, which means our bottleneck is even worse than it was before. And so that leads us to another kind of general principle. Uninterrupted paths are the fastest paths. And so if you are forcing people to slow down, that slowdown is going to have a lot of effect. Now, again, this is just talking about cars. But if you want to talk about like people, making people backtrack wastes their time. If you're making someone walk across campus to go check in at one place and then walk back to the team in the other place, that is using up their time. And so uninterrupted direct paths are the fastest. If you're able to get a path that isn't crossing, dealing with other outputs of other directions, good for you. Let's try and keep that up. And so with that being said, let's try to take our direction up and north. We'll take these people up and across and into the drop-off area. I'll just point out a fun little detail that you probably don't care about, but you'll notice that with the exception of this turn, I'm not counting this one. I'll explain this one in a second. But this is the only turn on our designated plan that is a left turn. That's because right turns are faster. When you approach a stop sign, right turns are more likely to be able to pull it off compared to a left turn that has to cross traffic. And so you'll see this as it approaches, turns right straight in, instead of having the pink line approach from the north, doing a right turn, then doing a left turn across traffic to enter. That would be slower, but again, just a fun little detail. And so a lot of right turns keep people moving, keep people through the drop-off area and out. In terms of interrupted paths, as these people leave, keep in mind that sending them back this direction could be, you're kind of sending people in the same direction. The more cars you have in one area, the more people you have, the more factory parts you have. Whatever you have in one area leads to the potential of things to slow down. And so with that, we're going to try and send these people outwards, away from our traffic areas, get them into parking spots, kind of farther away. And so that's kind of the general idea, that you want to keep people kind of constantly moving, or keep parts, or keep cars constantly moving away from each other into places where they can kind of finalize and wrap up and get out of the way for other people. Now, this little piece of road right here is really cool. This does not have a designated role, or a defined role in our current plan, but this is still a very important piece of road. You and I can sit here and we can design our traffic flow plans to be wonderful, and we put it into practice and it's horrible because people are irrational. They don't always follow directions, whatever it may be. In this case, this little piece of road actually serves as a bit of a buffer. If for example, if this drop-off system were to back up and start to cause traffic, a reasonable person might think, oh, well, I could just turn right and use this as like a pressure release valve, turn right and use a different drop-off area. Same thing, if this were to back up, people could go around and drop off the top. This little connection, while we don't designate people to actually use it, may be used in the event that something goes wrong. And so by leaving it there and not making it part of the plan, we're planning for our system to not be perfect. And that's a good thing because that allows it to fix itself. With that said, we have two major proposals. We have our plan, our blue line with drop-offs, and we have our pink line with drop-off and parking. Should we want to approach the city and say, here we go. We have not only thought about how we want to handle our own internal Beacon Park operations, but we also know how we're going to handle the big protecting our neighborhoods and giving the city peace of mind, making sure everyone's all happy. We can present them this as a proposal. They'll send this to the teams, and they'll know where to go, what to do. Now, our actual proposal that we're sending to them is this. We're not sending them a proposal. We're not doing anything with traffic flow. Yeah, in this case, kind of the weird last takeaway principle is that you don't always need to do this kind of stuff. I think if you were to go to something like a presidential inauguration or a major sporting event, they would absolutely be doing this kind of design. But we're a bunch of like middle schoolers and elementary school kids who are taking science tests for fun. We're not like that big a deal. And so in our case, by not sitting here drafting up this massive plan, putting people at intersections, blocking stuff off and directing people a certain way and micromanaging everything, we're just kind of going to let people do their thing and trust that when they do their thing, it'll be efficient enough to where they won't be mad at us. And so, yeah, it's very easy to overthink this kind of stuff. I think overthinking can be fun sometimes, but also you don't need to. And so with that kind of a clunk ending, we're done. And so, yeah, we'll be talking a little bit more about some things that are going into event planning at our next meeting. And we'll also talk more about compliments, which is always fun. If you haven't done so, please complete the week 7 write-up on Classroom. And then, come on, like, can I challenge you to compliment one person this week? Like one single person. Don't make it your best friend. That's cheating. Pick someone who's arm's length away. Like, you know about them. You're nice to them. You haven't been to their house. You haven't met their parents. Go up to one of those people and say something nice about their appearance or what they're wearing or something like that. And then let me know on Google Classroom. And then with that, we'll meet back here, same time, same place next week. We'll go through some more about compliments, more about event planning. Other than that, have a great week. We'll see you soon.